It was a sunny afternoon in a small town where everyone knew each other. The streets were quiet, and the sound of children playing in the distance gave the neighborhood a peaceful feeling. People went about their daily routines unaware that this ordinary day would soon turn into a moment that many would never forget. A young girl, just 16, was walking home from school. She had a light-hearted spring in her step, carrying a small backpack filled with her books and a notebook she'd been working on in class. Her blonde hair swayed gently in the breeze, and she smiled at neighbors as she passed by. She loved this time of the day when the sun was warm and the town seemed calm. But her peaceful walk was about to be disrupted in a way she could never have imagined. As she turned a corner, a police car slowly rolled by. The girl had seen these cars many times before, but this one felt different. The officer inside, a man in his late 40s, wore a stern expression. His eyes scanned the street as if looking for someone to punish. Something in the way he looked at her made her feel uneasy, though she could not explain why. Suddenly, the car stopped beside her. The officer stepped out, his boots making sharp noises on the pavement. The girl froze, clutching her backpack tightly. "Afternoon, young lady," he said, his voice casual but with an edge that made her heart race. She nodded, unsure what to say. Without warning, he leaned closer, and she realized he was invading her personal space. Fear surged through her body. She tried to step back, but he was already too close. In a moment that would haunt her forever, he reached out and grabbed the edge of her skirt. The world seemed to slow as she felt the inappropriate gesture. Her eyes widened in shock, and she quickly pulled her skirt down, her hands shaking. The officer smirked, showing no shame or concern for the fear he had caused. People passing by stopped to look, whispering to one another. Some were shocked and unsure what to do. The girl felt embarrassed and helpless, the color rising in her cheeks. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her legs felt like they were stuck to the ground. The officer finally stepped back as if nothing had happened and returned to his car. The engine roared to life, and he drove away slowly, glancing at her one last time with a look that made her stomach churn. The girl stood there for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. Tears blurred her vision, and she felt a mixture of anger, fear, and confusion. She wanted to scream, to call someone, but her voice felt caught in her throat. She hurried home, her heart pounding in her chest, hoping no one had noticed the incident too closely. When she arrived home, her parents could see immediately that something was wrong. She could not hold back the tears anymore. Through sobs, she told them what had happened. Her parents were furious, but they tried to stay calm for her sake. They reassured her that she was not to blame, that what had happened was completely unacceptable. They promised her they would do everything in their power to make sure justice was served. Word of the incident spread quickly in the neighborhood. People whispered about it in their homes, at the local store, and at the school. Many were shocked and angry. The community had always been close-knit, and such blatant abuse of power by someone sworn to protect them was almost unimaginable. There were discussions about whether anyone could stop a man in uniform from acting without consequence, and fear mingled with outrage in everyone's hearts. Among the residents who heard about the incident was a black woman known for her courage and sense of justice. She lived a few streets away and had been actively involved in community work for years. She had always stood up for what was right, helping neighbors, organizing local events, and mentoring young people. When she heard what had happened to the girl, her heart sank. She could not ignore such blatant injustice. She knew the situation needed someone brave enough to stand up and hold the officer accountable. The black woman decided she needed to act quickly. She contacted friends she trusted, people who believed in fairness and who had experience dealing with the local authorities. Together, they began to gather information. Eyewitnesses were found who had seen the officer's behavior. Some were hesitant to speak, fearing retaliation, but others were willing to step forward. The black woman spoke with them gently, explaining that telling the truth was important, and they would be protected as much as possible. As the girl processed the incident, she began to understand the importance of speaking up. At first, she had felt small, embarrassed, and powerless. But seeing the black woman's determination inspired her. She realized she did not have to suffer in silence. She could be brave, and she could be supported by people who genuinely cared about justice. Meanwhile, the officer returned to his routine as if nothing had happened. He believed his actions would be forgotten, that no one would dare challenge his authority. But little did he know that the black woman was already organizing a way to ensure accountability. She was methodical, careful and unwavering in her pursuit of justice. Every detail mattered, and she knew that patience and persistence were crucial. The girl and her family met with the black woman to discuss the next steps. They decided to document everything: the girl's account, witness statements, and any evidence that could support their case. They planned carefully, understanding that confronting someone in a position of power required strategy, courage, and unity. The girl felt a growing sense of empowerment as she realized that she was not alone in this fight. Days passed, and the community remained alert. Conversations about justice, fairness, and the abuse of power became common. Parents warned their children about being cautious, but also encouraged them to stand up for themselves. The incident became a catalyst for discussions about respect, accountability, and equality. Even those who had once remained silent began to feel the need to act. Inspired by the determination of the black woman and the courage of the young girl. One afternoon, the black woman organized a small meeting with trusted community members. They discussed what had happened and strategized on how to approach the authorities without risking the safety of those involved. The room was filled with a sense of urgency and purpose. Everyone understood that inaction would only allow injustice to continue. They needed to be strong, precise, and united. The girl watched the preparations, her fear gradually being replaced by a quiet strength. She realized that what had happened to her was wrong, but it could also become a turning point not just for her but for the community. She would no longer be a silent witness to abuse. She could be part of the change. The black woman, sensing the girl's growing resolve, offered guidance and reassurance. She emphasized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. As the first part of their journey toward justice unfolded, tension remained high. The officer was unaware that his actions were being documented, that witnesses were willing to speak, and that a determined woman would not let him escape accountability. The girl felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she also understood that with support, she could face it. In the evenings, the girl would often sit at her window, looking out at the quiet streets. She remembered the fear she had felt and contrasted it with the courage she was now learning to embrace. The black woman would sometimes visit, offering words of encouragement and reminding her that change was possible. They spoke about fairness, respect, and the importance of standing up for oneself and others. These conversations became a source of strength, slowly transforming her fear into determination. The town, meanwhile, began to buzz with anticipation. Neighbors discussed what had happened, some expressing anger, others confusion, but all aware that this incident could not be ignored. People began to realize that change required action, that justice needed champions willing to step forward even when it was difficult or dangerous. By the end of these first days, the foundation for accountability was being laid. The black woman had organized the evidence, rallied community support, and prepared a strategy. The girl had begun to find her voice, and her family had committed to supporting her every step of the way. The story of what had happened was no longer one of silent fear. It had become a story of courage, community, and the first steps toward justice. The day ended with a quiet determination. The sun set over the town, casting long shadows on the streets where the incident had occurred. The girl looked at the fading light and felt a flicker of hope. She knew that facing the officer would not be easy, but she also knew that she was not alone. She had allies, a plan, and a growing inner strength. The black woman's presence reminded her that justice was possible, and that even in the face of fear, courage could prevail. The first chapter of this journey had closed, but it was only the beginning. The incident had sparked a chain of events that would challenge authority, confront injustice, and inspire a community to take a stand. For the girl, the black woman, and everyone who had witnessed or heard of the event, the lesson was clear. Abuse of power could not be ignored, and one person's bravery could ignite the fight for what was right. The day after the incident, the town seemed quieter than usual. People whispered as they walked past each other, and glances were exchanged that carried a mixture of shock, anger, and worry. The story of what had happened to the young girl had spread quickly. Even though the details were upsetting, the people who heard it could not ignore it. Many of them were parents who imagined their own children in the same situation, feeling fear and frustration deep in their hearts. At home, the girl could not stop thinking about what had happened. The fear she had felt seemed to linger in every corner of her mind. She remembered the officer's smirk, the way he had looked at her and the way he had tried to assert power over her. She felt humiliated, but beneath that humiliation, a tiny spark of anger began to grow. She wanted the world to know that what had happened was wrong, that no one should be treated this way. Her parents continued to comfort her, listening patiently to every detail she could recall. They told her that she was brave for even speaking about it, and reminded her that she was not to blame. They discussed the next steps cautiously, knowing that confronting someone in authority was not easy. Still, they encouraged her to speak the truth, gather support, and not let fear control her life. Meanwhile, the black woman who had learned of the incident moved swiftly. She reached out to trusted friends and allies who were committed to justice. Her plan was careful and deliberate. She knew that rushing into confrontation could be dangerous, so she focused on gathering evidence first. She spoke to neighbors who had been walking nearby, asking them to recall exactly what they had seen. Some were hesitant, but her calm and persuasive words helped them find the courage to share their observations. Witnesses described the officer's actions, confirming the girl's story. Some admitted that they had felt unsure about speaking up, fearing the repercussions, but the black woman reassured them that their voices mattered. She explained that when people in positions of power are allowed to act without consequence, injustice thrives. Her words resonated deeply, and soon more residents began to step forward. At school, the girl noticed changes as well. Friends who had previously been quiet approached her with concern and support. Some had already heard the story from other students or from social media posts, and they offered comfort and solidarity. Teachers were also becoming aware of the situation. One teacher in particular encouraged the girl to document everything carefully and suggested that she keep a journal to capture her thoughts and feelings. The girl found this advice helpful, realizing that writing could give her clarity and strength. The black woman organized a small meeting at her home with a few key community members. They discussed strategies for confronting the officer in a safe, legal way. Everyone agreed that patience and precision were essential. They needed to ensure that every detail was accurate and that they had enough evidence to support their case. The meeting was filled with determination. Each person felt a sense of responsibility to protect the girl and to hold the officer accountable. The community's reaction was mixed. Some people expressed outrage and anger, calling for immediate action against the officer. Others were worried about potential backlash, fearing that challenging a police officer could be dangerous. The black woman reminded everyone that courage did not mean rushing in blindly. True courage meant acting with wisdom, planning carefully, and supporting each other. Her words brought reassurance and focus, helping the group channel their frustration into constructive action. As days passed, the black woman continued her work, interviewing witnesses, collecting statements, and making sure that the girl's account was documented clearly. She taught the girl that speaking the truth was a powerful tool. They practiced how the girl could recount her story confidently if asked, without letting fear take over. This preparation gave the girl a sense of control over a situation that had initially left her feeling powerless. The officer, unaware that a community was organizing against him, continued his routine. He seemed confident that his actions would be overlooked, that no one would challenge him. But the black woman's efforts were slowly building a network of accountability around him. Every statement, every observation, and every piece of evidence collected brought them closer to ensuring that he could not escape responsibility. At home, the girl's parents noticed her growing confidence. Though she still had moments of fear and sadness, they saw her start to take small steps toward empowerment. She practiced speaking about the incident aloud, rehearsing what she would say if she were asked directly. She began to understand that her voice could make a difference, that she did not have to be silent. The black woman also reached out to local journalists, explaining the situation carefully and providing evidence. She wanted the story to be told accurately, not sensationalized. Her goal was not to humiliate anyone, but to ensure that justice was served. The journalists were intrigued, recognizing the seriousness of the incident and the determination of the community. They promised to follow the story responsibly, giving the girl and her family the respect and protection they deserved. Community members began to discuss ways to raise awareness about respect, boundaries, and accountability. Parents held conversations with their children, teaching them that they had the right to say no and to speak up if someone made them feel unsafe. The black woman encouraged these discussions, knowing that change would not only address the immediate incident, but also help prevent similar situations in the future. The girl found comfort in these conversations. She began to see herself not just as a victim, but as a participant in a movement toward justice. Each supportive word, each witness who stepped forward, and each careful plan made her feel stronger. She realized that fear could be transformed into courage, and that standing up for herself and others was possible. As the community rallied, tensions began to rise subtly. Some residents were skeptical about whether the officer would face any real consequences. Others worried about how the situation could escalate. The black woman reminded everyone to stay focused on the facts, to document everything, and to act in unity. She emphasized that accountability required patience, persistence, and clarity, and that their efforts would eventually lead to justice. One afternoon, the girl and the black woman walked through the streets where the incident had occurred. They spoke quietly, reflecting on the journey so far. The girl shared her fears, her anger, and her hope for change. The black woman listened attentively, offering guidance and reassurance. She reminded the girl that courage was not about acting without fear, but about choosing to act in spite of it. Neighbors watched these interactions, inspired by the black woman's leadership and the girl's growing strength. They began to feel a sense of collective responsibility. The story had transformed from an individual act of injustice into a community movement. People realized that standing together could create accountability, even in the face of authority. At the same time, the officer remained oblivious to the growing storm. He continued his routine, confident in his authority, unaware that every action he had taken was being carefully documented. The community's plan was not about revenge, but about justice, and the meticulous preparation meant that his days of escaping accountability were numbered. The girl continued to heal slowly, supported by her family and the black woman. Each day brought new lessons about courage, resilience, and the power of community. She learned that speaking up was not easy, but it was necessary. She discovered that one voice, when joined by others, could challenge authority and create meaningful change. Evenings were often filled with reflection. The girl wrote in her journal, recounting her experiences and noting the people who had supported her. She reflected on the black woman's guidance, the neighbors' bravery, and her own growing confidence. Each entry reminded her that fear was temporary, but courage and justice could leave a lasting impact. As the second part of this journey unfolded, the town was no longer the same. People were more aware, more cautious, and more committed to fairness. Conversations about respect, accountability, and justice filled homes, schools, and community spaces. The incident had sparked a movement, showing that even one act of abuse could inspire a collective response. The girl's journey toward justice was still in its early stages. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, but she was learning to transform those feelings into determination. The black woman's guidance was invaluable, teaching her that preparation, patience, and persistence were keys to confronting injustice. Together, they were laying the foundation for a fight that would challenge authority, protect the vulnerable, and inspire change. The sun set over the quiet town, casting long shadows on the streets where the incident had occurred. Families gathered in their homes, reflecting on the events while the black woman continued her careful planning. The girl felt a quiet strength growing inside her. She understood that the journey ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she was not alone. The support of her family, the black woman, and the community gave her courage and hope. The first step had been taken, and now the second part of the journey was unfolding. The girl was learning that injustice could be confronted, that fear could be transformed into action, and that standing up for what was right required unity, bravery, and perseverance. The town, the community, and the girl herself were beginning to understand that even in the face of abuse, justice was possible when people chose to act. The black woman had been thinking about the situation day and night. She knew that what had happened to the young girl was not just an isolated incident, but part of a bigger problem that needed to be addressed. She understood that confronting the officer required more than anger. It required careful planning, strategy, and the support of the community. She wanted justice, and she was determined to make sure that the girl's voice was heard. Early one morning, she started reaching out to people she trusted. Friends, neighbors, and local activists all joined the effort. She explained the situation clearly and calmly, emphasizing the importance of acting legally and responsibly. She wanted everyone to understand that this was not about revenge or personal grudges. It was about making sure that someone who had abused power could not continue to hurt others. The group quickly agreed to work together, sharing responsibilities and creating a plan of action. The black woman began to gather evidence. She spoke to people who had seen the incident, asking them to provide written statements. She also collected photographs, videos, and any other material that could support the girl's account. Each piece of evidence was carefully documented, with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. She understood that facts mattered more than opinions and that a strong case required precision and clarity. Her dedication inspired others in the group, and soon they had a collection of reliable evidence that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, the girl was learning how to cope with her emotions. She still felt fear and embarrassment, but she also began to recognize her own strength. The black woman spent time with her, teaching her how to speak confidently about what had happened. They practiced together, role-playing conversations and questions that might come from authorities or the media. The girl realized that her voice mattered, and that she could be part of the solution rather than just a victim. The black woman also reached out to journalists who had a reputation for responsible reporting. She wanted the story to be told accurately, without exaggeration or sensationalism. The journalists were interested, understanding the seriousness of the case and the courage of the people involved. They promised to cover the story carefully, ensuring that the girl's identity was protected while highlighting the broader issues of power and accountability. The black woman knew that public awareness could add pressure and increase the chances of justice being served. At the same time, the officer continued his routine, unaware that a network of accountability was forming around him. He believed that his position would protect him, that no one would challenge him publicly. He continued to patrol the streets, interacting with residents and maintaining an air of authority. But behind the scenes, the black woman and her allies were quietly organizing. Every witness statement, every photograph, every detail gathered brought them closer to confronting him effectively. The girl's parents were heavily involved as well. They attended meetings with the black woman and contributed to the planning. They helped the girl document her experience, and they made sure she felt supported emotionally and mentally. Their presence was a source of comfort and strength, reminding the girl that she was not alone. They also reinforced the idea that the effort was about justice, not revenge, helping her focus on the right goals. As the days passed, the black woman became a symbol of courage in the community. People admired her determination and her commitment to fairness. Some neighbors who had initially been hesitant to speak began to share their experiences of being treated unfairly by authorities. They realized that collective action could create change, and they felt empowered by the black woman's leadership. The sense of community grew stronger, and the incident became a catalyst for broader conversations about respect, accountability, and the misuse of power. One evening, the black woman held a meeting in her home with the girl, her parents, and a few key community members. They reviewed all the evidence they had gathered and discussed the next steps. The conversation was serious but filled with purpose. The group planned how to approach local authorities and how to ensure that the girl's voice would be heard. They talked about possible challenges, including attempts by the officer to deflect blame or intimidate witnesses. The black woman reminded everyone that persistence and patience were essential. The girl listened carefully during these discussions. She could feel her confidence growing. For the first time since the incident, she felt that she had a role in shaping the outcome. She realized that her courage, combined with the black woman's guidance and the support of the community, could make a real difference. She began to understand that speaking out against injustice was not easy, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, the black woman continued to strengthen their case. She contacted legal advisors to understand the options available for holding the officer accountable. She learned about filing complaints, presenting evidence, and ensuring that due process was followed. Her approach was meticulous, leaving no room for mistakes. She shared this knowledge with the girl's parents, helping them understand the legal process and what to expect. The family felt more confident knowing that they had a clear plan. As the preparation continued, the black woman also focused on emotional support. She spent time with the girl, talking about fear, courage, and resilience. She reminded her that feeling scared was normal, but that courage meant taking action despite fear. These conversations helped the girl process her emotions and prepare mentally for the challenges ahead. She began to see herself not just as a victim, but as someone capable of contributing to change. The community, too, was becoming more engaged. People discussed the importance of standing up for others and ensuring accountability. Local businesses, schools, and organizations offered support in various ways. Some provided safe spaces for meetings, while others helped spread awareness responsibly. The collective effort sent a message to the officer that his actions would not go unnoticed, and that the community would protect its members. The officer, still unaware of the growing momentum against him, continued his routine, confident that his authority was unchallenged. He did not anticipate the careful planning and documentation that were taking place behind the scenes. Every witness, every photograph, and every statement collected was a step closer to ensuring that he could not evade responsibility. The black woman's strategic approach meant that when the time came to confront him, they would be prepared. The girl also began to notice subtle changes in herself. She was learning to speak up in small ways, asserting her opinions, and refusing to let fear dominate her decisions. Her interactions with friends, family, and the black woman reinforced her growing self-confidence. She started to feel a sense of empowerment that had been absent in the days following the incident. Each small step forward strengthened her resolve. As the weeks went by, the black woman continued to coordinate efforts. She encouraged witnesses to stay calm, organized meetings to review progress, and maintained open communication with the girl's family. She emphasized the importance of staying focused on justice, not retaliation. Her leadership inspired trust and confidence, helping the community unite around a common goal. In quiet moments, the girl would reflect on everything that had happened. She remembered the fear and humiliation of the initial incident, and she contrasted it with the courage and determination she was now experiencing. She realized that change was possible, that one person's bravery could inspire others, and that collective action could challenge even those in positions of power. These reflections strengthened her resolve and prepared her for the next steps. The black woman's efforts were also starting to attract attention outside the immediate community. Local media began reporting responsibly on issues of abuse of power and accountability, highlighting the importance of speaking up. While the girl's identity was protected, the story of community courage and justice began to spread. This external attention added a layer of accountability, making it harder for the officer to dismiss the situation or ignore the evidence. Through all of this, the girl learned an important lesson. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. She realized that by standing up for herself, she was also helping others who might face similar situations in the future. The black woman's guidance showed her that preparation, strategy, and community support were essential components of effective action. As part 3 of this story concluded, the foundations for justice were firmly in place. The black woman had gathered evidence, organized the community, and provided guidance to the girl and her family. The girl had grown stronger, more confident, and ready to face the challenges ahead. The officer remained unaware of the strength building against him, but the careful planning and united effort of the community ensured that accountability was on the horizon. The journey toward justice was well underway, and the determination of the girl, the black woman, and the community promised that change was not only possible but inevitable. By the time the 4th part of the journey began, the community had gathered all the necessary evidence and support to confront the officer. The black woman continued to guide the process, making sure that every step was taken with care and precision. She understood the stakes were high, but she also knew that standing by without action would be worse. Justice required courage, preparation, and persistence. The young girl had grown significantly since the initial incident. She still remembered the fear and humiliation vividly, but she had also discovered her own strength. With guidance from the black woman and the support of her parents, she had practiced recounting the events confidently, focusing on the truth and on the details that mattered. She understood that her voice could now have a powerful impact. The first step toward accountability involved submitting formal complaints to the local police department. The black woman carefully drafted the complaints, making sure that all witness statements, evidence, and documented details were included. Each statement was clear, concise, and factual, leaving no room for misinterpretation or dismissal. The girl's parents were heavily involved, ensuring that their daughter's perspective was accurately represented. They knew that taking these steps would not be easy, but they also understood that it was necessary for the sake of justice. Once the complaints were filed, the black woman organized a meeting with community members and legal advisors. They discussed how to ensure that the investigation would be thorough and unbiased. The focus was on creating accountability, not on personal revenge. They also considered the officers' likely reactions and prepared strategies to address any attempts to intimidate or deflect. Every detail was meticulously planned, showing the black woman's skill in turning outrage into effective action. The officer initially seemed confident, unaware that a well-prepared case was being presented against him. He continued his routine, assuming that his position would protect him from any consequences. But soon the investigation began to bring his actions into the light. Witness statements, photographs, and videos left little room for denial. The careful documentation collected by the black woman in the community made it clear that the officer had overstepped his authority in a serious and inappropriate way. The girl faced moments of anxiety as the investigation unfolded. Each day brought anticipation and uncertainty, but she found strength in the black woman's guidance and in the support of her family. She reminded herself that fear was natural, but courage meant acting despite it. The lessons she had learned about preparation, clarity, and confidence helped her stay composed during the process. The community's involvement also played a crucial role. People who had previously been hesitant to speak now felt empowered to share their experiences and insights. Their support reinforced the girl's confidence and showed that standing together could create meaningful change. Parents, neighbors, and friends attended meetings, offered advice, and even provided emotional support. The collective effort sent a clear message. The officer's actions were unacceptable, and the community would not allow such behavior to go unchallenged. Legal advisors guided the girl and her family through the process of presenting their case. They explained the steps involved, the importance of remaining calm and factual, and how to handle any attempts to intimidate or manipulate the situation. The black woman reinforced these lessons, ensuring that everyone involved understood the strategy and remained focused on justice. The girl began to feel more confident as she saw that preparation and support could make a difference. One day, the officer was formally summoned for questioning. He appeared confident at first, believing that his authority and position would protect him. However, the evidence presented was thorough and undeniable. Witness statements, photographs, and other documentation clearly showed his inappropriate behavior. He tried to dismiss the situation at first, but the careful organization and persistent focus of the black woman and the community left him with little room to maneuver. During the questioning, the young girl recounted the events calmly and clearly, demonstrating the courage she had developed over the past weeks. Her voice, steady and firm, left an impression on everyone present. She described her fear, her humiliation, and the impact of the officer's actions, but she also highlighted the importance of accountability and justice. Her words carried weight, showing that even someone who had initially felt powerless could make a significant difference when supported by a strong community. The black woman observed closely, offering guidance and reassurance from the sidelines. She encouraged the girl to focus on facts and to remain composed, reminding her that courage was not about anger or revenge, but about truth and accountability. Her presence provided a sense of strength, and the girl drew confidence from knowing that she was not alone. As the investigation continued, the officer faced increasing scrutiny. Reports were filed, community members provided testimony, and the media began to cover the story responsibly. The black woman ensured that the coverage focused on justice and accountability rather than sensationalism. This attention added pressure, making it clear that the officer's actions would not be ignored or forgotten. The process was challenging, with moments of tension and frustration. The officer attempted to deflect blame and minimize the situation, but the combined efforts of the girl, her family, the black woman, and the community made it difficult for him to avoid responsibility. Each day brought small victories, such as corroborated witness statements or new pieces of evidence, reinforcing the sense that justice was gradually being achieved. Throughout this period, the girl continued to grow in confidence and resilience. She realized that her experience, while painful, had given her a unique opportunity to make a difference. She learned that speaking up, even when it was difficult, could inspire others and create meaningful change. Her courage became a source of hope for the community, showing that abuse of power could be challenged effectively. The black woman also focused on emotional support for the girl and her family. She reminded them that the journey toward justice could be long and stressful, but that perseverance and unity were essential. She emphasized the importance of celebrating small victories, acknowledging progress and maintaining focus on the ultimate goal of accountability. Her guidance helped the girl stay strong and resilient, even when the process felt overwhelming. As the investigation moved forward, the officer began to realize that his actions had consequences. He faced formal reprimands, public scrutiny, and potential disciplinary measures. The careful documentation and persistent community effort ensured that he could not evade accountability. The black woman's strategic planning and unwavering commitment had transformed the initial incident into a powerful example of justice and resilience. The community watched as the process unfolded, inspired by the courage and determination of the girl and the black woman. Parents, neighbors, and friends recognized the importance of standing up against abuse and supporting one another. The incident became a catalyst for broader discussions about respect, accountability, and the proper use of authority. People began to understand that collective action, guided by wisdom and persistence, could create meaningful change. Finally, after weeks of careful preparation, testimony, and investigation, the officer faced formal consequences for his actions. The community felt a sense of relief and accomplishment, knowing that justice had been served. The girl, the black woman, and the supportive neighbors had successfully challenged an abuse of power and demonstrated that courage, preparation, and unity could create real change. The girl reflected on the journey, realizing how much she had grown. She remembered the fear and humiliation she had felt, but she also recognized the strength and confidence she had developed. She understood that speaking up, supported by a strong community and guided by someone experienced and courageous, could make a difference. Her experience had transformed her into someone who could stand against injustice and inspire others to do the same. The black woman's role in the process was widely acknowledged. She had organized the community, gathered evidence, provided guidance, and ensured that the pursuit of justice remained focused and effective. Her leadership and courage had shown that one determined person, working with others, could challenge abuse of power and protect those who were vulnerable. As Part 4 concluded, the town began to feel a renewed sense of hope and unity. The girl had regained her confidence, the black woman's efforts had brought justice, and the community had come together to support one of its members. The officer faced consequences for his actions, demonstrating that accountability was possible even for those in positions of authority. The story became a powerful example of courage, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what was right. After the officer faced the consequences of his actions, the town slowly began to heal. Life returned to its familiar rhythm, but the experience had left a lasting impression on the young girl, her family, and the community. The girl felt a deep sense of relief and empowerment. She had faced one of the most difficult moments of her life and had come out stronger. What had begun as fear and humiliation transformed into courage, resilience, and an understanding of the power of speaking up. The black woman continued to support the girl and her family, though now their interactions shifted from planning and strategizing to reflection and growth. They talked about everything that had happened, the emotions they had experienced, and the lessons they had learned. The girl realized how much she had grown, not just in confidence, but in understanding the importance of standing up for what was right. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The community also experienced change. Conversations about respect, boundaries, and accountability became more common. Parents taught their children to recognize and challenge inappropriate behavior, to speak up when they felt unsafe, and to support others who might be facing similar situations. Schools held discussions about respect, fairness, and the importance of ethical behavior. People began to understand that even small actions could create meaningful change, and that collective effort could protect the vulnerable. The black woman's role in the story became widely respected. She had taken a difficult situation, organized the community, and guided the young girl and her family with patience, strategy, and courage. Her actions inspired others to act when they witnessed injustice, showing that one determined individual could make a real difference. Many residents began to see her as a symbol of courage, resilience, and fairness. The young girl reflected on how much her life had changed. She thought about the fear she had felt when the officer first approached her, and she remembered the shame and confusion that followed. But she also remembered the courage she discovered within herself, the guidance of the black woman, and the unwavering support of her family and neighbors. She understood that speaking out had not only helped her find justice, but it also strengthened her sense of self-worth and confidence. Evenings in the town became moments of quiet reflection for the girl. She would sit by her window, looking out at the streets where everything had happened. The sun would set, casting long shadows and bathing the town in soft light. She thought about the journey she had been on, the people who had stood by her, and the lessons she had learned. Every shadow reminded her that even in darkness, courage could shine through. The black woman encouraged the girl to think about the future. She spoke about how standing up for justice was not just about one incident, but about shaping a community where respect and fairness were valued. She emphasized that the girl's experience could help others, and that by sharing her story responsibly, she could inspire courage in those who might face similar challenges. The girl began to see her role not only as a survivor, but also as an advocate for fairness. The girl's family also reflected on the journey. They were proud of their daughter's strength, and they were grateful to the black woman for her guidance and support. They recognized that the experience had brought them closer together and had taught them valuable lessons about resilience, courage, and the importance of standing up for what is right. They discussed ways to continue supporting their daughter and to help others in the community who might need assistance. In the weeks that followed, the town's sense of unity grew stronger. People were more aware of the importance of looking out for one another, speaking up against injustice, and supporting those in need. Local organizations and schools began implementing programs to educate residents about respect, accountability, and the responsible use of authority. The incident that had caused fear and tension transformed into a catalyst for positive change. The officer, having faced consequences for his actions, became a cautionary example of accountability. Residents realized that abuse of power would not be tolerated, and that the community could come together to protect its members. This realization brought a sense of safety and empowerment to the town, reinforcing the importance of vigilance, courage, and collective action. The young girl continued to grow and learn. She participated in school discussions, shared her experiences with trusted friends, and became a role model for younger students. Her journey inspired others to speak up and to challenge unfair treatment when they encountered it. She understood that her voice, once silenced by fear, now had the power to encourage others and create positive change. The black woman remained an active mentor and supporter, guiding not only the girl but also other members of the community who sought to understand their rights and responsibilities. Her work strengthened the bonds within the town, creating a network of support, awareness, and accountability. People felt reassured knowing that there were leaders willing to step forward, and they were inspired to act courageously in their own lives. Community events began to reflect the lessons learned from the incident. Discussions about fairness, respect, and courage became a regular part of neighborhood gatherings. Parents and children shared stories of standing up for what is right, and neighbors encouraged one another to act with integrity. The town, once quiet and complacent, became more engaged, informed, and committed to justice. The young girl's relationship with the black woman became a lasting source of guidance and inspiration. Their conversations often focused on how to turn challenges into opportunities, how to support others, and how to maintain courage even in difficult situations. The girl learned that growth often comes from facing adversity, and that helping others could be a powerful way to heal from her own experiences. As time went on, the town saw lasting changes. The police department implemented new training and oversight to prevent abuse of power. Community members were more vigilant and proactive, ensuring that incidents like the one the girl experienced would be less likely to occur. The story of the young girl, the black woman, and the collective effort of the community became a lesson in courage, resilience, and justice for everyone. The young girl continued to thrive, embracing her newfound confidence and sense of purpose. She participated in school programs that encouraged young people to understand their rights and responsibilities, and she shared her experience in ways that inspired others to act courageously. Her journey showed that even in moments of fear and vulnerability, individuals could find strength, and communities could create meaningful change when they worked together. The black woman's legacy in the town remained strong. She had demonstrated that courage, wisdom, and determination could challenge injustice and protect the vulnerable. Her efforts reminded the community that standing up for what is right required persistence, planning, and unity. She had shown that one person could ignite change, and that support from others could amplify that impact. In the end, the town learned that justice is not just about punishment, but about empowering individuals, fostering awareness, and creating a culture of respect. The young girl's experience became a turning point, showing that speaking up against wrongdoing could lead to positive transformation. The community realized that protecting each other and demanding accountability could strengthen the bonds between neighbors and create a safer, fairer environment for everyone. Even years later, the girl would remember the lessons she had learned. She would think of the Black woman who guided her, the community that supported her, and the courage that had allowed her to stand up against fear. She would carry those lessons into her future, using her voice to advocate for fairness, justice, and compassion wherever she went. The story of that one afternoon, once filled with fear and humiliation, became a story of empowerment, resilience, and hope. The town, too, continued to grow stronger. Conversations about accountability and respect remained part of everyday life, and residents continued to support one another. The incident became a reminder that injustice could be confronted successfully when individuals acted with courage, planning, and unity. The Black woman's guidance, the girl's bravery, and the community's collective effort had created lasting change. The young girl, the Black woman, and the town had all been transformed. Fear had been replaced by courage, humiliation by empowerment, and helplessness by action. The story concluded with a sense of hope and inspiration. Even in the face of wrongdoing, standing up for justice could lead to meaningful change. The experience showed that one person's bravery, combined with support from others, could protect the vulnerable, hold the powerful accountable, and inspire an entire community to be better. As Part 4 concluded, the town began to feel a renewed sense of hope and unity. The girl had regained her confidence,